The sun was low, sending warm orange light across the crowded city streets. The market was alive with noise, the clatter of carts, the chatter of vendors, and the constant shuffle of feet over cracked pavement. Among the throng, a young black girl moved carefully, balancing a small wooden tray filled with handmade bracelets, keychains, and tiny trinkets. Her hands were worn and slightly calloused from years of hard work, yet she carried her load with care, arranging her little treasures neatly, hoping someone would stop and notice. She had been coming to this market every day for months, waking before dawn to prepare her small collection of items. Each piece was made with her own hands, threaded and tied carefully, polished until it shone. She knew every knot, every color choice, every tiny imperfection that made them unique. They were more than just trinkets. They were pieces of her hope, small things she sold to try and keep her family afloat. The first hours of the day were always the hardest. Many people walked past her stall without even glancing. Some frowned when they saw her, shaking their heads as if she were invisible. Others tossed a quick, condescending smile and kept moving, their attention absorbed by bigger stalls with brighter colors, flashy signs, and shiny new products. She had learned not to take it personally, though it stung every time. She kept her chin up and repeated the same mantra over and over in her head. She had to sell something today, or the week would slip by without any income, and her family would struggle even more. Her mother had been sick for months, unable to work, and her younger brother and sister depended on her. Every coin she earned went toward food, medicine, and school supplies. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit on the edge of her small bed, counting the money she had saved, feeling a mix of pride and worry. The world felt heavy on her shoulders, but she refused to let it crush her spirit. She had learned early that life demanded resilience, and she was determined to give her family every chance she could. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed higher, beating down on the crowded streets. The market smelled of fried food, fresh fruit, and dust. Vendors shouted over each other, advertising everything from clothing to gadgets, from perfumes to fake watches. The girl moved along her little section of the market, holding her tray in one hand and trying to catch the eyes of anyone who might spare a few coins. "Bracelets, please? Only $2 each," she said politely to a passing man, her voice small but steady. The man barely glanced at her and muttered something about being late for work. She tried another customer, a young woman with a stroller. "Colorful keychains, ma'am? Perfect for your little one," she said. The woman smiled faintly, shook her head, and hurried past. Hours passed like this. Every rejection made her heart tighten, but she refused to give up. She remembered what her mother always told her. If you stop trying, nothing will ever change. Keep going, even when it feels impossible. She repeated those words in her mind like a lifeline, gripping the tray tighter, refusing to let despair take hold. By midday, the market became even more crowded. Families came to buy lunch. Teenagers wandered in groups, and workers on their breaks strolled past the stalls. The girl spotted a few people who seemed wealthy, dressed in neat suits and polished shoes, walking slowly as if they had nowhere to be. She took a deep breath and approached them carefully. "Excuse me, sir, ma'am. Please take a look." "These are handmade," she said, her voice quivering slightly. She held up a bracelet, a small band of vibrant beads, hoping it would catch their eye. One of the men glanced at it briefly, barely moving his fingers, and then turned away. Another woman looked at her, frowned, and walked off without a word. Her shoulders sank, but only for a moment. She wiped her brow with the back of her hand and muttered under her breath, "I can't give up. I have to keep going." She moved to another part of the market, hoping someone would see her items with interest. It was then she noticed him, a man standing a few feet away, watching her with calm, measured eyes. He was tall, dressed in a crisp suit, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that made him stand out from the crowd. Unlike the others, he didn't look past her or dismiss her. Instead, he lingered, observing how she arranged her items, how she spoke to potential customers, and how she never let a rejection shake her focus. For a moment, the girl forgot to speak. There was something in his gaze that felt different. He wasn't judging her for being poor. He wasn't looking for flaws. He was simply watching, taking in every detail. Her heart beat faster, a mix of curiosity and nervousness. She took a deep breath and approached him carefully, holding out her tray. "Please, take a look," she said softly, locking eyes with him. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of hope she carried. "Please buy us," she whispered, gesturing to the tray, and then in a silent way, including her family in the plea. The man stepped closer, his expression unreadable but calm. He picked up one of the bracelets, turning it over in his fingers. He didn't speak immediately. The girl stood there, barely breathing, her entire body tense with anticipation. Every moment felt stretched, as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but clear. "You made these yourself?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I make them every night after school and on weekends. I just want to help my family." He studied her carefully, not just the items, but the girl herself. There was honesty in her eyes, a quiet strength despite the exhaustion etched on her face. He could see she had faced challenges most adults would struggle with, and yet she continued to push forward, refusing to give in to despair. Without saying much more, he reached into his pocket and handed her a generous amount of money, more than she could have earned in a week. Her eyes widened and she tried to thank him, but words caught in her throat. She had never seen so much money at once. It wasn't just about the coins, it was the recognition of her effort, the acknowledgement that someone saw her worth. He smiled faintly, a small, almost invisible gesture, and said, "Keep going. Don't stop." Then, without another word, he walked away, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. The girl stood frozen for a moment, clutching the money to her chest. Her heart pounded with a mix of shock, relief, and something she hadn't expected: hope. Maybe life could change. Maybe someone could see her, really see her, and care enough to help. She returned to her tray, but her hands were lighter now, her steps more confident. She felt a spark inside her, a tiny flame of possibility that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She knew the road ahead would still be hard, full of rejection and struggle, but for the first time in a long while, she believed she could make it. The market continued around her, noisy and chaotic, but she felt a sense of calm. Somewhere in the crowd, a man had noticed her, had acknowledged her effort, and had given her a gift far greater than money. A glimpse of hope, a belief that her courage mattered. She packed up her tray at the end of the day, her body tired but her spirit lighter. As she walked home, she thought about her family and the small joys they could now afford. A proper meal, new school supplies, maybe even a small treat for her siblings. She imagined her mother smiling, her little brother and sister laughing, and it made every moment of exhaustion worth it. That night, before sleeping, she counted the money carefully, arranging it in neat stacks. She whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would not waste this chance. She would keep working, keep trying, and maybe one day, she could change not just her life, but the lives of those around her. Somewhere in the city, the man who had bought her items returned to his own life, unaware that he had done more than a simple act of kindness. He had sparked a fire in a young girl who refused to be broken, who carried her family's hopes on her small shoulders, and who would one day remember this moment as the beginning of a life changed forever. And so, with the city lights flickering on and the sounds of the bustling streets fading into the night, the girl held on to her dreams a little tighter, her heart a little lighter, and the hope that someone, somewhere, saw her for who she truly was. The morning air carried a sharp chill, unusual for the city at this time of year. The girl woke before sunrise, her small room dimly lit by the thin rays of light that seeped through the cracks in the old wooden window. Her hands were sore from yesterday's long hours at the market, but she moved quickly, preparing her little tray of handmade bracelets, keychains, and trinkets. Each item had been carefully arranged the night before, polished and sorted so that every color, every shape, would catch someone's eye. Her mother stirred quietly in the corner, coughing softly, and the girl gave her a gentle smile. "I'll make some money today," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "I'll bring something for everyone. Just wait." Her siblings were still asleep and she didn't want to wake them. She carefully placed the tray on her small back, slinging it over her shoulder like a precious bundle. The streets were quieter than yesterday. Vendors were setting up their stalls, shouting greetings to each other, but the usual rush of customers hadn't yet begun. The girl moved quickly through the alleys and paved streets, stepping carefully over uneven cobblestones, her eyes scanning for potential buyers. Even in the early hours, the weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. She knew every coin mattered. Every small sale could mean a full meal for her family. By the time she reached the market square, the hustle had begun. Merchants called out their prices. The aroma of fried food mingled with dust and smoke. and the sound of laughter and shouting blended into a constant hum. She found her usual corner, setting down her tray, adjusting the display to make it as inviting as possible. Hours passed, and the pattern remained the same. Many people glanced briefly at her items and walked on. Some sneered, some ignored her entirely, and a few tossed a coin without a word, their faces blank. She smiled at each person anyway, hoping that kindness might persuade even one to stop. Bracelets, keychains, small gifts. Please take a look, she said over and over, her voice calm but filled with urgency. Mid-morning brought a small flurry of customers, families and workers taking breaks from nearby offices. The girl tried to catch their attention with gentle phrases, holding up her brightest bracelets, arranging keychains in small clusters to look colorful and lively. Still, most walked past, absorbed in their own lives. Then she noticed him again, the man from yesterday standing a few feet away, watching her. He was dressed in the same crisp suit, polished shoes, and calm expression. He hadn't approached, hadn't spoken, just observed. Her heart skipped a beat. It was one thing for strangers to ignore her, but someone to watch her with interest, someone powerful it seemed, made her nervous. For a moment she hesitated. Could she approach him? Was it proper? She had seen people in fine clothes smile politely and move on, but he hadn't. He lingered, his eyes following her hands as she arranged the trinkets, his expression unreadable yet strangely patient. Gathering her courage, she stepped closer and lifted her tray slightly. "Good morning, sir. Would you like to take a look?" "Everything is handmade," she said, her voice soft but steady. She tried to sound confident, though her stomach fluttered. She couldn't afford to miss an opportunity like this, not when each sale could mean food for her family. The man nodded slightly and stepped closer. He picked up a bracelet, examining it slowly. His gaze then shifted to her face. "You make these yourself?" he asked, his voice calm, curious but not condescending. "Yes, sir," she replied quickly. "I make them every night. I sell them to help my family. My mother is sick and my little brother and sister. They need food and school supplies. I just want to help." Her words came in a rush, unpolished but honest. She looked him directly in the eyes, hoping he could understand everything she was trying to say. He studied her carefully, not just the items, but the girl herself. There was determination in her eyes, a quiet strength despite the youth and fatigue written across her face. He could see the weight of responsibility she carried, yet she continued to hold herself with dignity. "I see," he said softly. He didn't move on, didn't dismiss her. Instead, he continued to examine the bracelets in his hands, his fingers tracing the beads as if appreciating the effort poured into each one. The girl stood silently, her hands gripping the edge of the tray, waiting. She didn't fully understand why he hadn't walked away like all the others, but she felt a strange sense of hope stirring inside her. After a moment, he reached into his pocket and handed her a small stack of bills. It was far more than she could have earned in a day, maybe even a week. Her eyes widened and she tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She had never held so much money at once, and it felt surreal. "Keep going," he said simply. "Don't stop." Then he stepped back and merged with the crowd, leaving her standing there frozen and breathless. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Her hands shook slightly as she continued arranging her items, her mind replaying the moment over and over. She tried to sell to other customers, but her attention kept drifting back to him. Why had he stopped? Why had he been interested in her story? For the first time in a long while, she felt that someone might see her, really see her, not just as a child selling goods, but as a person with worth and potential. That afternoon, the market became busier. Street performers drew crowds, families wandered past, and business picked up slightly. The girl sold a few bracelets and keychains, enough to buy bread and some vegetables for her family. Yet even with the small sales, her mind remained on the man in the suit. She couldn't explain it, but she felt that her life had changed, even if in the smallest way. When the sun began to dip toward the horizon, she packed up her tray. Her back ached, her feet were sore, and her fingers were rough and red from handling the trinkets all day. Still, she walked home with a lightness in her step she hadn't felt before. She imagined her family's faces when she gave them the money, the hope it would bring for at least one day. At home, her mother looked tired but smiled faintly when she saw the girl enter. "Did you manage today?" she asked softly, her voice weak but kind. "Yes," the girl replied, carefully counting the money and handing her mother a portion. "We'll have enough for food tonight and for the children to go to school tomorrow. It's going to be okay." Her younger siblings crowded around her, eyes wide with excitement. They didn't fully understand the struggles their sister faced daily, but they felt the relief in the air. The girl watched them, her heart swelling with love and determination. She had done what she had to do, and somehow, against the harshness of life, she had managed to keep hope alive. Later that night, she sat by the small wooden window, staring at the city lights flickering in the distance. She thought about the man in the suit, about his quiet interest in her, and about the words he had spoken. "Keep going. Don't stop." They replayed in her mind like a promise, a spark of possibility she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. She imagined herself in a different life, one where she didn't have to struggle so fiercely, where she could focus on learning, growing, and helping her family without constant fear. Though the thought seemed far away, she clung to it, letting it guide her dreams that night. The next morning, she returned to the market with renewed determination. Her tray was filled with new items, brighter and more carefully made than before. She moved through the crowd with confidence she hadn't possessed the day before. She greeted customers warmly, arranged her trinkets artfully, and spoke with a calmness that belied the years of struggle etched into her young face. And there he was again. The same man standing quietly a short distance away, watching. This time she didn't hesitate. She held out her tray and whispered, "Please, take a look." Her eyes met his, and for the briefest moment it felt as if the world had narrowed to just the two of them. He nodded again, and she saw a faint smile. He picked up a keychain this time, turning it over slowly, examining it with the same patience and attention as before. She spoke softly about her family, about the small joys and hardships of life, about how much every coin mattered. She didn't ask for anything beyond recognition. She didn't expect miracles, she only hoped to be seen, and for the first time she felt that maybe she was. That maybe someone powerful, someone from a world far different from hers, could notice her courage, her determination, and her heart. The day passed with more small sales, enough to provide for her family and maybe a little extra. But the real gift wasn't the money, it was the spark of hope. The belief that life could change, that someone could see her struggle and care. That night, she sat with her mother. Her siblings gathered close, recounting the day as if it were a story from another life. She spoke of the man in the suit, of the coins, of the quiet moments that seemed to hold more meaning than words could express. Her mother listened, her eyes soft with emotion, knowing that something had shifted, not just in their circumstances, but in the girl herself. As she lay down to sleep, the girl whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would not give up. She would continue to work, to learn, and to dream. Somewhere in the vast city, a man had noticed her, and perhaps that was the beginning of something she could never have imagined, something that could change her fate. The night was quiet, but in her heart, a fire burned brighter than it had in years. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time she believed that it could be different, that her life and the life of her family could change in ways she had only dared to dream. The girl woke to the faint glow of dawn filtering through the cracks of her small room. Her hands were sore and stiff from the long hours at the market, but she moved quickly, determined not to waste a single moment. She had learned early that each day was a chance and every opportunity mattered. Today, however, there was a strange excitement in her chest that made her steps lighter. Her heart beat a little faster. She had been thinking about him, the man who had watched her, who had bought her items, who had offered her quiet encouragement. She didn't know his name, didn't know why he had taken an interest in her, but something about the way he had looked at her, the way he had listened, had stayed with her. It wasn't just the money. It was the feeling that someone believed she could do more, that her effort mattered, that her struggle was seen. After breakfast, she carefully packed her tray and stepped out into the cool morning air. The streets were slowly coming alive. Vendors shouted greetings, carts rattled over uneven pavement, and children laughed as they ran past. The girl weaved through, the crowd keeping her tray steady, her mind focused yet alert for any sign of him. It didn't take long. He was standing near a quiet corner of the market, observing her as always. This time he didn't look like a passerby. His eyes met hers immediately, and there was a small, faint smile playing on his lips. She hesitated for only a moment before approaching him, holding her tray out. "Good morning, sir," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "Would you like to take a look at my items? Everything is handmade." He nodded, picking up a bracelet and turning it over in his fingers. "I see you've worked hard on these," he said, his tone calm but with an edge of curiosity that made her stand taller. "Tell me about yourself." The girl hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Most people didn't care to listen. They looked, sometimes they judged, but they rarely asked. She took a deep breath. "I make these every night and on weekends. I sell them to help my family. My mother is sick, and my younger siblings need school supplies. I want to help them, but it's hard. Every coin matters." He listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers. There was no rush, no interruption, just genuine attention. The girl was surprised by how it made her feel. Most people she met in the market were too busy with their own lives to notice someone like her. Yet here was a man who not only listened but seemed to understand. After a moment, he reached into his pocket and handed her more money than she had ever seen at once. Her eyes widened and she tried to speak, but no words came. She clutched the bills tightly, her mind spinning with disbelief. "Keep going," he said simply. "Don't stop." Then, unlike the first time, he lingered a moment longer. "I want to help you in a bigger way. Are you willing to learn?" The girl blinked, uncertain what he meant. "Learn?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "I have a small place where you could work, just a little, to help your family and to teach you skills you might not have access to otherwise. You don't have to do this forever, only if you want. But I need someone determined, someone who is willing to try even when it's hard. I've watched you for a few days and you have that." Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't trust easily, and she had learned to be cautious. People offered promises all the time, and most didn't last. Yet something about him felt different. The way he looked at her, the quiet patience, the genuine respect, it made her believe that maybe, just maybe, he meant it. I would like to try," she said slowly, her voice a mix of hope and fear. "If you really think I can do it," he smiled faintly. "I don't think I know. Show up tomorrow morning and we'll begin." The rest of the day passed in a daze. The girl went through the motions at the market, selling a few items, but her mind kept returning to the promise of tomorrow. She tried to imagine what it would be like to work somewhere new, to learn new things, to maybe, just maybe, change her family's future. That night, she barely slept. She lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what awaited her. She felt nervous, of course, but also a strange sense of excitement. Something in her chest told her that this was a turning point, a chance she could not afford to waste. She resolved to work harder than ever, to learn quickly, and to make the most of the opportunity, no matter how intimidating it seemed. Morning came, and she arrived at the location he had instructed. It was a building far larger than any she had ever entered. Polished floors, clean walls, and the subtle hum of activity. She paused at the entrance, feeling small and out of place, but she reminded herself that she belonged here as much as anyone else. She stepped inside, clutching her tray as if it were a shield against the unknown. The man greeted her with the same calm demeanor. "Welcome," he said simply. "This is where you will begin. Don't worry about knowing everything right away. You will learn step by step." The girl nodded, swallowing her nerves. She was shown to a small workspace, tidy and organized, with materials neatly arranged and instructions written clearly. Her first tasks were simple: sorting, assembling, and packaging small items. Even though the work seemed basic compared to her struggles at the market, she approached it with the same determination she had always carried. As the hours passed, she realized that the environment was different from anything she had known. People were patient, willing to teach, and mistakes were treated as lessons rather than failures. For the first time, she experienced an environment where effort was valued, where guidance was offered instead of judgment. The billionaire observed quietly from a distance, occasionally offering advice or encouragement. He didn't micromanage, but he watched carefully, noting her focus, her eagerness to learn, and the way she approached challenges. She felt both nervous and proud under his watchful gaze, knowing that every small action mattered. Over the next few days, she learned more than she had imagined possible. She discovered new skills: how to organize efficiently, how to approach tasks methodically, how to communicate with others respectfully and confidently. Each small success boosted her morale, and she began to realize that she was capable of more than she had ever believed. At the end of each day, she returned home, tired, but satisfied. Her family noticed the change in her, the way she carried herself with a new confidence. She shared what she had learned, even teaching her younger siblings some of the skills she had picked up. The small apartment felt lighter, filled with hope rather than only struggle. One afternoon, the billionaire asked her to join him in a brief meeting with a few staff members. She was nervous, unsure what to expect, but she followed him, holding her head high despite the trembling in her hands. He introduced her to the team, explaining that she was learning and contributing and that her insight was valuable. The staff were polite but curious. They asked questions about her background, her experience, and her thoughts on small improvements. She answered honestly, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as she realized that her words were being heard and respected. The man nodded subtly at her as the meeting ended, a quiet signal of approval. She felt a swell of pride and determination. She was learning not only skills but also the courage to speak, to contribute, to believe in herself. Each small success was a brick in a foundation she had never dared to imagine building before. Days turned into weeks, and the girl began to see real change in herself. She was more confident, more organized, more willing to take initiative. The work wasn't easy. She still faced long hours, challenges, and moments of doubt, but the environment was supportive, and she had someone who believed in her. For the first time, she felt that she was not just surviving but growing. Her family noticed too. Her mother smiled more often, her younger siblings laughed freely, and the little apartment began to feel like a home rather than just a place to survive. The girl took pride in knowing that her efforts, once so small and uncertain, were creating a ripple of positive change in the lives of those she loved. One evening, as she prepared to leave, the billionaire called her aside. "You've done well," he said quietly. "Not just in work, but in attitude and determination and learning. Keep this up and I promise opportunities will come that you haven't yet imagined." She looked up at him, words failing her for a moment. Then she whispered, "Thank you. I won't let you down. I'll work hard, I promise." He smiled faintly. "I don't expect perfection. I expect effort, and you've given more than that already." As she walked home that night, the city lights glowing softly in the distance, she felt a quiet but powerful sense of hope. The path ahead was still long, still filled with obstacles, but she no longer felt alone in facing it. She had guidance, opportunity, and a growing belief in her own strength. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the future. She didn't know exactly what it held, but for the first time, she allowed herself to dream a little bigger. She pictured her family living comfortably, her siblings going to school without worry, herself learning and growing, and perhaps one day, helping others the way she had been helped. The fire of hope burned brighter than ever in her heart. She knew the world was vast and often harsh, but she also knew that with determination, courage, and someone who believed in her, she could begin to change her fate. And for the first time, she truly believed it. The morning sunlight spilled into the workspace, casting warm golden light over the neatly arranged materials. The girl had grown accustomed to the routine, but she no longer approached it as a mere obligation. Each day had a purpose, each task an opportunity to learn. She moved with confidence now, her hands steady as she sorted, assembled, and prepared items. Her work was precise, deliberate, and full of care, reflecting the effort and pride she poured into it. Her colleagues had begun to notice the change in her. At first, they had been curious, cautious, unsure how to respond to a young girl from the street stepping into a world so different from hers. But as days turned into weeks, they observed her determination, her willingness to learn, and her honesty. Slowly, respect grew, not only from those around her but also from her, as she realized that she belonged in this space just as much as anyone else. The billionaire watched from a distance, attentive yet unobtrusive. He had noticed more than her work ethic. He had noticed her attitude, her ability to adapt, her patience, and her quiet courage. He began to introduce her to small responsibilities beyond the tasks she was assigned, testing her ability to think independently, to solve problems, and to take initiative. One morning, he called her into his office. The room was spacious, filled with shelves of books, awards, and neatly arranged objects that spoke of decades of experience. She felt nervous, her heart beating faster than usual, but she reminded herself to stay calm. "You've been doing well," he said, his voice steady. "I think it's time for you to take on something more." I want you to observe a small project I'm working on and contribute your thoughts. Don't worry if you don't get it perfectly at first. Just try." The girl nodded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She had never been given such trust before. Usually adults expected mistakes, or worse, assumed she was incapable. But here was someone who not only believed she could try, but encouraged her to do so. Over the next several days, she worked closely with a team on the project. She observed meetings, took notes, and offered small suggestions. At first, her ideas were tentative, soft-spoken, hesitant. But as the team began to consider her perspective, she grew more confident, learning the value of her own voice. The billionaire would occasionally give her gentle guidance, redirecting when necessary but always encouraging her to continue contributing. One afternoon, a problem arose that required immediate attention. A shipment had been delayed, threatening to hold up the project. The girl noticed a small solution, a way to adjust the schedule that could prevent further issues. She hesitated, unsure if she should speak up, but she remembered the encouragement she had received and the trust placed in her. "Excuse me," she said quietly, addressing the team. "If we adjust the sequence here, it might help us stay on track without delaying everything." The room went silent for a moment. Then one of the senior staff members nodded, reviewing her suggestion. It worked. The project stayed on schedule. The billionaire's eyes met hers, a small but unmistakable sign of approval. She felt a surge of pride and relief. Her idea had mattered, and more importantly, she had the courage to speak it aloud. That evening, she walked home feeling lighter than she had in years. She thought about how far she had come, from selling trinkets in the market to contributing to a serious project in a large office. Her family was waiting for her, curious to hear about her day. She shared the story carefully, emphasizing the small victories, knowing they would understand the significance even if they didn't grasp the details. Her younger siblings listened with wide eyes, imagining their sister as someone capable of shaping things in a world much larger than the streets they knew. Her mother smiled quietly, her tired face brightening with pride and hope. It was more than money now. The girl had begun to change the energy of her home, filling it with optimism and confidence. Days turned into weeks, and the girl's confidence grew. She began to anticipate challenges rather than fear them. She asked questions, offered input, and learned how to navigate the delicate balance between humility and assertiveness. The billionaire continued to watch her quietly, stepping in only when necessary, letting her experience both responsibility and growth. One day, he called her aside again. "You've grown quickly," he said. "I want to show you something." He led her to a conference room where a team was discussing a new initiative. He explained the concept to her briefly and then asked her opinion. She listened carefully, analyzing the situation with the skills she had been developing. When it was her turn to speak, she suggested a small improvement, something practical, realistic, and considerate of both the team's capacity and the project's goals. The team paused, then nodded. They implemented her suggestion, and it worked. The billionaire's subtle nod in her direction told her more than words ever could. She was making a difference. The realization filled her with a mix of pride and humility. She was still learning, still growing, but her effort was meaningful. Back at home, she shared the story with her family. Her mother's eyes glistened with tears and her siblings clapped excitedly. The girl felt warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just about money or survival anymore. It was about impact, about shaping something, about proving to herself that she could rise above her past struggles. The transformation wasn't easy. Some days were exhausting. Some mistakes felt devastating, but she learned resilience in a new way, not just surviving, but facing challenges head-on and finding solutions. She also discovered patience, realizing that growth didn't happen overnight, and that mistakes were part of learning, not reasons to give up. Her interactions with colleagues also taught her about empathy and teamwork. She had been used to competition in the market, selling trinkets, fighting for attention, but here collaboration mattered more than individual success. She learned to listen, to support others, and to contribute without seeking personal recognition. The lessons went beyond professional skills. They shaped her character, her understanding of trust, respect, and mutual effort. The billionaire began to give her increasingly meaningful responsibilities. She was asked to manage small aspects of projects, coordinate minor tasks, and communicate with different teams. Each new responsibility was a test of her ability and character, and each time she rose to the challenge. Slowly, she became more than a student. She became a contributor, someone whose input was valued and respected. Her confidence spilled over into her personal life. She approached her family with a stronger sense of agency, helping her mother manage household needs, guiding her younger siblings in their studies, and creating small routines that brought order to their home. The money she earned was still important, but the lessons, skills, and recognition she received had become even more valuable. One evening, after a long day of work, she sat quietly by the window, looking at the city lights flickering in the distance. She reflected on her journey. Not long ago, she had been pleading in the streets, hoping for anyone to notice her effort. Now she had a place in a larger world, a role where her ideas mattered, a mentor who believed in her, and a family whose hope for the future had grown. Her thoughts drifted to the future. She imagined continuing to grow, to learn, and to help others. She pictured herself mentoring someone else one day, just as she had been guided. The idea filled her with purpose and joy. She realized that success wasn't just about personal gain. It was about lifting others, sharing knowledge, and creating opportunities where none had existed before. The billionaire had become more than a mentor. In small, quiet ways, he had shown her what it meant to trust, to invest in someone's potential, and to recognize courage and resilience. He had given her more than work. He had given her a vision of what her life could become. She knew the path ahead would still have challenges, but for the first time, she felt prepared. She had learned not just skills, but confidence, judgment, and the importance of persistence. Weeks later, she faced another challenge, a larger project that required her to coordinate a small team. At first, she was intimidated. She had never been in a leadership role before. She worried that she might fail, that others would not respect her, that she would disappoint. But she remembered the lessons she had learned: preparation, patience, observation, and courage. She approached the task methodically, assigning responsibilities, guiding team members, and listening carefully to their feedback. When problems arose, she remained calm, analyzing options and finding practical solutions. By the end of the day, the project had progressed successfully, and her team acknowledged her leadership. The billionaire's quiet nod of approval reinforced the feeling that she was growing into her role naturally and effectively. The girl understood something important: growth was not linear. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and times when success seemed impossible. But with effort, reflection, and guidance, she could navigate the challenges and emerge stronger. She felt a sense of accomplishment deeper than any money or reward could bring. At home, she shared her experience, explaining the problems and how she had solved them. Her mother listened quietly, tears in her eyes, proud not only of her daughter's success but of the strength, resilience, and maturity she had developed. Her younger siblings watched with admiration, seeing someone they could look up to, someone who had proven that courage and determination could change a life. The girl lay in bed that night, exhausted, but fulfilled. She thought about the journey from the crowded streets to this point, about the countless hours of struggle, the moments of doubt, and the small sparks of encouragement that had guided her. She felt a quiet certainty that her life was no longer defined solely by hardship. She had the tools, the guidance, and the experience to shape her own path. Somewhere in the city, the billionaire continued his work, unaware that he had transformed more than a life. He had helped create a ripple of hope, courage, and potential that would continue to grow. And the girl, for the first time in her life, could look at the future with confidence, knowing that her efforts, her choices, and her determination had the power to change everything. The girl woke to the soft glow of dawn, feeling a mixture of excitement and calm determination. Over the past months, she had learned more than she ever thought possible. The long hours at the market, the challenges of helping her family, the lessons from the billionaire, they had all shaped her into someone stronger, more confident, and ready to face even bigger challenges. Today felt different. There was a sense in the air that something important was about to happen, though she didn't yet know what. She prepared for the day carefully, arranging her workspace, reviewing her tasks, and making sure everything was in order. Her hands, once rough and calloused from the market, were now skilled and steady from months of meticulous work. She moved with quiet confidence, knowing that her effort mattered and that she had earned the respect of those around her. When she arrived at the office, the billionaire was waiting. His presence was calm and measured as always, but today there was a faint warmth in his expression. "Good morning," he said simply. "Today is a step forward. I want you to lead a small project independently. It's your chance to take what you've learned and apply it fully. Don't worry. You have support if you need it, but I want you to guide this on your own." The girl felt a flutter of nerves. Leading a project independently was something she had never done before. She worried about making mistakes, about failing in front of the team, about disappointing someone who had believed in her so much. But she pushed the fear aside. She remembered the lessons she had learned: preparation, observation, patience, and courage. She nodded, her voice steady. "I understand. I'll do my best." The project involved coordinating a small team to complete a series of tasks for a larger initiative. She had to manage time, resources, and communication, ensuring that every piece fit together smoothly. At first, the work felt overwhelming. There were unexpected problems, miscommunications, and decisions that weighed heavily on her. But she faced each challenge calmly, analyzing options, asking questions when necessary, and trusting the skills she had developed over the past months. Her team responded to her guidance with respect. She had earned their trust not through authority, but through honesty, diligence, and the willingness to learn alongside them. She listened carefully to their ideas, incorporated suggestions, and made decisions based on practical solutions rather than ego. Slowly, the project began to take shape, and the sense of accomplishment filled her with quiet pride. By midday, she had navigated several significant challenges. A shipment delay threatened to derail part of the project, but she remembered a solution she had once suggested in the past and adapted it to the new situation. The team followed her lead, and the issue was resolved efficiently. Her confidence grew with each successful decision, each small victory reinforcing the belief that she could handle responsibility. The billionaire observed from a distance, offering subtle guidance only when necessary. He had given her independence, but he remained a quiet presence, a source of reassurance without overshadowing her own efforts. When he finally approached her at the end of the day, he smiled faintly. "You did well," he said. "Not just with the tasks, but with your leadership, your problem-solving, and your ability to keep the team focused. You've grown a lot." The girl felt a rush of pride mixed with relief. She had feared failing, yet she had succeeded. She realized that the skills she had developed, confidence, patience, and critical thinking, were now tools she could use for anything. She had moved beyond survival. She was shaping her own path. When she returned home, her family was waiting, eager to hear about her day. She shared every detail: the challenges, the solutions, the moments of doubt and triumph. Her younger siblings listened in awe, inspired by her courage and determination. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of pride and gratitude, knowing that her daughter was no longer just scraping by but building a future with purpose. Over the following weeks, the girl continued to take on more responsibilities. She managed larger aspects of projects, trained new team members, and even began to propose improvements to processes. Each success built her confidence, and each challenge reinforced her resilience. The environment nurtured her growth, but it was her own determination that carried her forward. One day, the billionaire invited her to a private meeting. He handed her a document outlining a new initiative, one that required both creativity and leadership. "I want you to lead this," he said. "It's an important step, and I believe you are ready. You will have resources and support, but the vision and execution will be yours." Her heart pounded. Leading such a significant initiative was daunting. She felt a mix of fear and excitement, knowing that this was a true test of everything she had learned. But she remembered all the obstacles she had overcome: the market streets, the challenges at home, the small victories at the office, and she realized she was ready. She nodded. "I will do it," she said firmly. The project required careful planning. She organized meetings, delegated tasks, and created timelines. There were unexpected obstacles, technical problems, and moments when she questioned her own judgment, but she pressed on, remembering the guidance she had received and trusting her instincts. Slowly, her leadership shaped the project into something tangible, something meaningful, something that reflected both her vision and her team's effort. Throughout the process, she faced moments of self-doubt, but she had learned to manage them. She reminded herself that mistakes were opportunities, not failures, and that perseverance was as important as skill. Her colleagues responded positively, inspired by her determination, and the team grew stronger under her guidance. When the project reached completion, it was a success. The team had achieved their goals, the process had been efficient, and the outcome exceeded expectations. The billionaire praised her privately, acknowledging the intelligence, creativity, and leadership she had demonstrated. She felt a profound sense of accomplishment, realizing that she had not only learned but had applied her knowledge in a meaningful way. Her success brought changes at home as well. The family's life improved steadily. They had enough to live comfortably. Her mother's health stabilized with better care, and her siblings thrived at school. The girl's determination and hard work had created opportunities that had once seemed impossible, and the family celebrated each small victory together. Despite her achievements, she remained humble. She continued to work diligently, learning new skills, helping her colleagues and mentoring others. She remembered the struggles that had shaped her and used them as motivation to grow, knowing that her journey was not only about personal success but about creating a better life for those around her. One afternoon, the billionaire called her into his office again. He handed her a small box neatly wrapped. "This is for you," he said. "It's a symbol, not just of what you've accomplished, but of the potential you have to continue achieving. You've changed a lot, and I hope this reminds you to keep striving." She opened the box carefully and found a small, elegant bracelet inside. It wasn't expensive in the sense of materials, but it carried meaning. The delicate piece symbolized perseverance, growth, and the belief that effort and courage could transform a life. She looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll never forget what you've done for me." He nodded quietly. "You earned it. Keep going, and one day you'll help someone else the way you've been helped." The girl left the office holding the bracelet in her hand, feeling a mixture of gratitude, pride, and determination. Her journey had taken her from the crowded streets where she begged for attention to a place where she was respected, trusted, and capable of shaping her own future. She realized that her life had truly changed, not just in circumstances but in confidence, purpose, and vision. She continued to excel in her work, taking on increasingly complex projects, mentoring newcomers, and contributing innovative ideas. Her influence grew, not because of wealth or title, but because of her dedication, empathy, and courage. She had learned to see challenges as opportunities, setbacks as lessons, and success as a combination of effort and persistence. At home, the family's life flourished. They lived comfortably, attended school regularly, and embraced the stability the girl had fought to create. The apartment was filled with laughter, warmth, and hope. The girl often reflected on the long journey from market streets to this life, realizing how far she had come and how much potential remained. Over time, she also found ways to give back. She helped others in her neighborhood, shared her skills with younger children, and encouraged those who struggled as she once had. She understood the power of opportunity, guidance, and belief, and she wanted to extend the same chance to others. One evening, as the sun set, casting golden light over the city, she sat quietly by her window, holding the bracelet the billionaire had given her. She thought about the journey, the hardships, the small victories, the guidance, and the lessons learned. Her life had been transformed in ways she had never imagined. She realized that the power to change her fate had always been within her, but it had taken courage, persistence, and the belief of someone who saw her potential to unlock it. With a deep breath, she whispered a promise to herself. She would continue to work hard, to help her family, to grow, and to